All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll give everybody a few minutes here to get gathered. Thank you so much for stopping by today. It's going to be a quick whirlwind. We have a lot of things happening around the world. Remember the good old days when we actually had trusted news sources that could do this job and average everyday Joes could go about their day and get information? That was a long time ago. So let me go ahead and check and make sure that we are live here and streaming. All right, Girl Scran, we are live and streaming. It just shows up on my phone real late. Oh, well, there we go. All right, we are live. All right, so we got a bunch of stuff going on right now. It's 5 p.m. Central here in the great state, great nation of Texas. We are live on the 10th of September, a day that will live on forever in many of our minds. Tomorrow is September 11th. We are going to do a quick 15-minute segment about September 11th. Some things that you'll love to hear. One of the most important days in the history of this country, one of the most important days in the history of the world, but there are still more unanswered questions in that event than there ever have been answered. And we're going to go through some of those questions and answers tomorrow. Legitimate concerns, legitimate things that happened, and things that our government needs to answer so that we can get some clarity on our past, so that we can build a better future. But for today, we're going to be going through all kinds of stuff. We're going to be going through what's happening around the world, what's happening here, what's happening in finances. We're going to be very light on finances as we prepare for this Saturday Night Live episode called Harris versus Trump Debate. Anxiously awaiting that. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to do a video just kind of recapping the debate and some of the ridiculous things I anticipate on hearing. The world is filled with people who speculate, especially anyone who's seeking the truth. There's a ton of speculation. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. Almost none of it has happened. And that's fine. That's fine. The speculation game, it's just not what I do. It's not the game that I play. I try to see what's actually happening and anticipate what could happen, but there's always 4 or 5 different possibilities for what could happen versus what is happening. So today we're going to go through some real quick information on the financial markets. I've been going through this for so long. I'm trying to bottle up some of this information, especially on energy, as I'm giving a presentation to a few hundred investors on Thursday, private event there. So I'll hold some of this information back. It's long-term thinking, more looking at the oil and gas space as well as the energy space for the coming year. Interesting things happening there. I was speaking at another investor conference to about 2,000 people about digital assets, Bitcoin specifically. There is an open forum for that, so I don't know if I'm allowed to do my Bitcoin workshop. I've been kind of saving it for that, but I think it's free to register. Anyone can register and join that event, so we'll take care of that. Have a full slideshow for you, a full presentation, 40 minutes plus 20 minutes Q&A. Should be great. Starting to do a lot of these things here. I got a lot of interviews coming up on other podcasts, and I'm launching out an interview series here at the end of the month. I'm going to try to do 4 a month interviews with some people you're going to be just fascinated with. Most people who didn't want to be known, they don't want to be known. I love those people the most. The people who want to be famous generally keep a lot of information back, and we want to be able to get to the root problem, the root cause, the root solution of what's moving forward, and some of the truth about history and legal systems. I think very few Americans, myself included, fully understand our legal systems, and I think that's an area we're going to really focus on to get some clarity around the country. But we have a lot of stuff to cover today. Finances, international things happening, 2 breaking bits of information right before we hopped on air here today. I'm going to go through those, and election stuff from all facets. Interesting things happening around this country right now with election fraud, police departments, bureaus of investigation, all types of things that are brewing and boiling to the surface, and hope to be able to shed some light on that. So let's do as we always do. Again, this podcast is completely focused on the 3 things they don't want you to talk about. I could probably add a 4th in there, but money, politics, and religion. The other thing they clearly don't want me to talk about is actual history. So we will be talking about money, politics, and religion with dedicated episodes to true history. A lot of it is going to be contrary to what you know and what you learned in school, because our schools are indoctrination camps. And that is proven. The more old books that you read, the more proof that you will get that our educational system is completely useless when it comes to history. Math, I can see. Science, medicine, useless. History, useless. But let's hop into what we are doing right now. So the S&P 500 is something we've been watching for quite some time. I thought that the top of the S&P 500 would be in the 5,500 range. It actually has gone into the mid 56, 5650, 5630. It is now floundering down in the 5,400s. I believe this is the decline that we've been targeting and watching for quite some time. Historically, we have a lot of people out there that are really excited about rate cuts because they can't wait to borrow money. That is a sign of an addiction to debt in this country. That is really sort of the main problem. Not a bad thing, not casting any dirt on anyone who's waiting to borrow money at a cheaper rate to buy a home. That's just simply part of American life. It's simply the addiction to debt that we have, and the tyrannical Bolshevik-style central bank that we use. By the way, the Bolsheviks and Karl Marx said that a central bank was crucial to developing a communist nation. Just keep that in mind. I know I've had many arguments with people who say, when you talk about central banks, it's just BS, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Some things I certainly am. If I really went into my conspiracy theories with you guys, I'd probably keep you up at night for about 6 consecutive weeks. And I will get into that after the election. But right now, it's important to understand that this is a problem in this nation. Everyone should understand that. So the central bank is right now touting that they are looking at a rate cut between 0.25 and 0.5 next week. So next Thursday, we'll get official hearings, or Friday, excuse me. We'll get official hearings from the committee and get a breakdown of whether or not they're going to drop rates, and not at all, 0.25 or 0.5. I think it's important to note that historically, the last time that we saw 2 half-point rate cuts were 2007 and 2001. The following one-year returns on the S&P 500 were negative 18.79% in 2007 and negative 12.4% in 2001. Now, the overall financial picture or groundwork in this country at that point in time was much stronger than it is today. We didn't have a pandemic. We weren't recovering from a black swan event, which we have not recovered from. I love hearing people in online interviews talk, I'm going to vote for Biden or Harris because, we've really come a long way since COVID. We have not. We've been backsliding. The jobs that have been created were old jobs being filled. And this is evidence in a couple simple stats, is right now our bankruptcy rate for corporate bankruptcies through this year, right now, 2024, is on pace to beat the year 2010. That's the highest bankruptcy rate that we have seen in the last 15 years. We are now on pace to beat 2020. So there will be more corporate bankruptcies in 2024 than there were during a black swan pandemic. We are also approaching last year, which was just under the 2020 rate. So in the last 2 years, we will have 2 of the highest bankruptcy rates in the last 15 years for corporations. Corporations do many things. I know a lot of people, especially communists, really hate corporations. Corporations do many things, many functions within an economy. Number 1, they provide jobs. Number 2, they provide taxable income. They provide taxable income from the corporation and from the employees they employ. They provide goods and services to a society, to a community, to a nation, to multiple nations overseas. They provide real estate bolstering. Every time new businesses build businesses near residential homes profit. They provide freedom and security and safety and insurance plans and 401ks. These are pivotal to the American society. Good corporations are pivotal to a successful American society, and they are going bankrupt at a rate faster than 2010 and 2020. 2 big years. 2010 was really when the financial crash started to play out in corporations, because there was a lot of bailout money going around back then, and we're not seeing that type of bailout money. I won't get into get into bail-ins. I've talked about that probably 400 times in the last 3 years doing these podcasts. It's important to note, Charlie Biello is an economist that does a lot of stuff on TV. He does a really good job. His Twitter page is fantastic, and he put out a breakdown of health insurance costs since 1999. Health insurance is up 314% since 1999. That is a 25-year span with a 310% increase, while inflation was increasing at 2.5%. So I've talked about this a few times. Insurance premiums are predicated on the ability for people to predict your state of health, how much you will actually need the insurance you have. Insurance by itself is a scam. What it does, especially health insurance, what it does is it allows the providers to charge a heck of a lot of money they don't deserve for simple things. If you've ever had a baby, I remember we had our baby at Cedar-Sinai, our daughter at Cedar-Sinai in Los Angeles, and Cedars-Sinai charged us, I think it was $14 for a box of Kleenex. And I mean, you can look through your itemization at any hospital and you'll find these ridiculous prices that you don't pay, the insurance company does. So they raise these rates over and over again. They pass the rising costs and rates onto the insured so that you continue to pay more premiums while the middleman doesn't lose a penny. And that is kind of the American structure. It's definitely the insurance structure in America. And it is not a successful avenue for any person, whether that's the insurer, the insured, or the recipient of the insurance money. It is not a successful path moving forward, especially at a 314% increase over a 25-year period with 2.5% inflation over that time. Ally Bank dropped about 16.5% today. Ally Bank, very well-known lender in the auto space. Their stock dropped because they came out and announced that they are seeing a massive uptick in defaults on auto insurance and auto payments. This is not unusual. And these are big indicators. You can listen to all the CNBCs and the big guys talking about treasury rates and yield curves and all the fancy things that you want, because I pay attention to that and I try to simplify it as best I can for you. The best way to find out where an economy is to find out how many people can pay their bills. It's never been simpler than that to explain, and it never will be. It is easy to determine whether you are in a good state of affairs in an economy or a bad state of affairs based on people's ability to pay their bills. When places like Allied Bank are losing 16% of their stock value because of the fact that people are not able to actually meet their payments for their car loans, you are in a bad economy. Credit card defaults are now over 8.9%. That was 7.4% last month. That means another 1%, or otherwise known as about 3.3 million Americans, can no longer pay their credit card payments on time. However, if you've ever been in credit card debt, you understand that even if you don't make a payment for a few months, you can still use the card until they shut it off. This is what America is right now. It's a microcosm. We have drawn out all we can draw out from a government perspective, from a citizen's perspective, from every single agency perspective. And now we are on that 3-month lateral zone where we are just filtering along until they shut off the spigot and we can't use the credit anymore. That is exactly where we are. That's Ally Bank today. JP Morgan has come out and said that they believe that we will go into a recession. If you are not noticing that any of the conglomerates that exist in this country have nothing but their own interest in mind with the things they do, then you are lost in the equation. JP Morgan is about 2 years behind recession. I believe that we are going into something much deeper than that, and something we will have to probably make a new name for when it's over with, because it doesn't really fit recession or depression. We are definitely in stagflation. That is obvious from my last episode talking about the PMI and how the price of things is going up, inventory is going up, but wages are going down or sideways. Many different indicators there to prove that we are in stagflation. Goldman Sachs is saying to the market right now that they believe that the worst is not over with the yen carry trades, the leverage carry trades, which everyone blamed for our dying duck day in the stock market. That is not it. That is a symptom, not the problem. And they're over leverage in NVIDIA. NVIDIA, I have been saying this for at least 6 months. Watch NVIDIA. The world will blindly go after the headlines and not read the article. This is the problem in America. We want everything quick. We want to trust everyone to tell us what's right. So I'll reiterate, if you're reading things online, especially financially, use the phrase "if true." If true, this is the scenario. NVIDIA by itself reminds me a lot of multiple corporations that have deceived shareholders. They are now under investigation for antitrust law violations. They are a monopoly in the AI chip space, which, number one, should, it's going to make some money, right? It's a monopoly in AI chips, and AI chips are flying off the shelf right now. But when you look at the problem that exists in public companies using accrual accounting versus cash accounting, NVIDIA is a gigantic perpetrator of accrual accounting to make their actual revenue look larger than it truly is. This definitely comes back to bite large companies with big stock run-ups in the butt. I would be very cautious of NVIDIA. That's just my take. This is not personal or financial advice for you. Big Lots filed for Chapter 11. I love Big Lots. I've been going to Big Lots since college. I think it's a great place. They have filed for Chapter 11. That is a restructure, not a close down. So they will close some of their stores along the way. I think it's important to note that Big Lots services an audience that doesn't have all the money in the world. This is a place for discount goods for your home, craft goods, all kinds of different things that they sell there. You're noticing a lot of these niches that are getting destroyed, and they're getting destroyed in areas that serve the lower and middle class. Dollar General and Dollar Tree came out today, or excuse me, an independent report showed that these two companies made $90 million last year based on their ATM fees, or the cash back fees that they charge when you get cash back at the register. It is a big business for these guys. They do get an ATM fee, but it also tells you when people are buying these goods at these dollar stores that they're pulling out cash in hand. So yeah, Kelly, Big Lots is still open so far. I don't expect them to close all of it down right now. It's a Chapter 11 that's a restructure of their debt. This is the same type of Chapter 11 that Donald Trump filed on his corporations. It doesn't mean you're closing down the company. It means what you're doing is restructuring your debt. Big Lots did state in their bankruptcy filing that the two major contributors to their financial distress were the fact that inflation had been killing them, the cost of buying the things that they sell to you are very high, and that interest rates were too high and they couldn't borrow working capital. So you're starting to see what I talked about over a year and a half ago, understanding how most large corporations actually don't live on their own cash. They live on their ability to make cash, and then they use that cash as a way to get loans to cover their operating expenses. This is a problem with a debt-addicted society and a debt-addicted community as a whole, especially in the financial world. Housing affordability is now 8 times income. So the average American home cost 8 times the average American income. This is the highest we've ever seen. The last time that we saw this was 2006, when the average American home cost 7 times the amount of the American average income. I try to put things in simple terms. If the average home is about $425,000 right now, the average American household income is $73,000. So you're looking at $40,000, maybe $50,000 for the average person in America. I remember, I'm old enough to remember 2006, 2007. It was a very big era in my life. And I remember being in California, and my wife and I wanted to buy a home. We were young and naive and had no idea how expensive things were. So we started looking at houses. The first one we looked at, honestly, was a dump. But it was one that I looked at and I said, well, we could put some paint on it. We can, put a new room in here. We can do all these things. It'll be a great house. And we thought, hey, this is great. Little tiny 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It wasn't even a 3-and-2 starter kit. And we asked what they were asking. It said $745,000. And we both, our jaws just dropped. We moved from the Midwest. We had no idea that a house that was 1,100 square feet could be $745,000. That same house today is probably $1 million in Pacific Beach as part of San Diego. So I would assume that we are looking at that same type of action on the back end in real estate. Now, it will help the real estate market. It's important to understand how rates interact with all these things. So you have the interest rate environment. So if we drop, this is the give and take that the globalists play when it comes to national economies. If we drop a 0.5 point on the interest rate, that's certainly going to help you buy a house, right? Very simple. More people who can borrow mortgage money to buy homes, that'll stimulate the real estate economy for a time being. When they drop rates, since everyone borrows from the Fed for the cash they lend out, it'll drop the rates on credit cards. It'll drop the rates everywhere on debt. Most importantly, it'll drop the rates on debt for the national government, who has an election coming up, and the most important GDP report in American history is going to be this October. So they will drop the rates to help the government out, to give them a better GDP report. It will help short term with credit cards and buying homes and refinancing homes and buying cars. I would advise everyone in America not to do any of the above except for restructure debt and get lower rates. The credit crisis that's coming from the mounting debt that the government has actually taken on is insurmountable for most people, and it's going to cause all types of problems moving forward. But it's important to note that if you're a real estate person, you'll probably see a short-term lift in some pricing because you'll have new buyers. People who couldn't afford a monthly payment at 7.25% mortgages can definitely afford a payment at 6.25 or 6. And that will be good for home buying. And I will always advise people in this way. This is financial advice right here. When you buy a home you want to live in, think of it as a home. The problem with people buying houses is everything is an investment. And they oftentimes say, well, I can buy this home even though the rates are high because the rates will eventually go down and I can refinance. I have talked to dozens of people in my life who are stuck in a bad loan because they couldn't get out of it because they played rates wrong. So if you're buying a new home and you love the home and you want to raise your family there and live there for 30 years, just go ahead and buy it. do it cautiously, get good rates, get good pricing, and make sure that you can afford it. But look at it as a home, not necessarily as an investment. I think it's a big problem out there. As we finish up some of the financial information, it's important to note some of the recent activities. Just now, about an hour ago, the city of Beaumont, Texas, just issued a shelter-in-place order for the people of Beaumont, including sealing the fireplaces that they have. So all windows need to be closed, shut down air conditioning, no outside air. I don't have any other information beyond that. I have sent text messages out to people in the oil and gas industry to get information about that. But it is right near the Exxon oil refinery in Beaumont, Texas. So I'm assuming something happened there. We've had about 15, maybe 16 refinery explosions and fires in America in the past 18 months that I can think of off the top of my head. So I'd assume that would be there. We are witnessing, whether you want to believe it or not, we are witnessing an attack on our infrastructure and our supply chains. It's been very slow and grueling over the last 3.5 to 4 years, but that's exactly what you're watching. So I anticipate nothing but bad news. Shelter-in-place orders are not given away willy-nilly unless you're in a blue state and people have the sniffles. I'm going to get into that in a moment too. But definitely something to look at there. Pakistan just discovered the 4th largest oil and gas reserves in the world. This is now the 3rd nation in the world that has now found a huge oil and gas reserve. These oil and gas, like Guyana is another one. The largest oil reserve in the world's in Guyana. That's great. We've known about it in oil and gas for 20 years. We're just now telling people about it. We've known that there's oil in Pakistan. We have watched a worldwide overreach from multiple tyrannical leaders in nations that have restricted nations' abilities to use their own infrastructure. And one of the problems we have in America, in particular, because that's where we live, our infrastructure is set and designed for oil that we don't drill on this soil. You know, most of our refineries, this refinery in Beaumont, Texas, it refines a type of oil that we get from pocket drilling or from straw drilling, where it looks like a pocket and you drop a straw in it and pull it out of the ground. It's not fracked shale. That actually has to be processed overseas. So there are these alignments that have been made over the last 40 years that honestly don't make any sense to a common person, but they make perfect sense to a globalist who wants to control production and cost all around the world. So hopefully we'll get some information about this. But Pakistan now has a gigantic oil reserve, theoretically. Some of these things, they use them for press to be able to raise money for their country, and they never end up drilling it. That has happened 4 times I can think of in the last 50 years. But let's move on to some other topics here. I want to make this quick so we can all get to the debate and enjoy ourselves as we hopefully watch Donald Trump destroy Kamala Harris, which shouldn't require anything but being quiet and answering questions. Let her talk, Mr. Trump. It'll take care of everything, Mr. President. The DOJ. The DOJ is fascinating. Right now, we are living through the most confusing era in human history. About half of the country now, actually it's about 60% of the country, realizes our last election was rigged. 60%. 40% will just completely deny it no matter what happens. I think we're kind of at the breaking point of people who will actually understand that the election in 2020 was rigged before some declassification or some information coming out that'll let you know, yes, with verification and certainty, it was there. Here's an easy one if you want to share it. We had 151 million votes cast in 2020. We only had 133 million voters. That should be enough for someone to say something's not right here. But we're starting to see some very interesting trends around the country. Recently, today, the Department of Justice issued a warning to states to tread lightly while cleaning up their voter rolls. Tread lightly. I'm sorry. We live in a country that uses a flag that says, "Don't tread on me." If we are seeking the truth and we are seeking election integrity, the Department of Justice should never have to come out and say, tread lightly cleaning up your voter rolls. In fact, the Department of Justice should be assisting the states in cleaning up their voter rolls so that we have the right president in place, or senator, or congressman. Now, this correlates directly with what happened in Millersville, Tennessee. The sheriff, or one of the department heads of the police department there, came out and said that the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, which could also be called the Bolshevik insurrection, they actually came to the Millersville Police Department and cleaned out all their files on a multinational fraud investigation. I actually don't have any. It's in Middle Tennessee, but I don't know where Millersville is. But the gentleman who made the video probably should get some personal security from the guys on the force. So the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation broke into a police department and took their evidence files and digital files. And what this gentleman says in his video is that they were tracking a multinational fraud investigation dealing with multiple BRICS nations, including China. And the evidence that they had was on mortgage fraud, which is running rampant in this country. I mean, there is so much mortgage fraud. It is insane. And they were investigating that being run by multinational organizations. Again, he mentioned multiple BRICS nations. And at the same time, it had to do with election fraud and election integrity. So why would the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation go into a police department, raid their files, and steal them if we had a fair and honest election in 2020? These are coffee table conversations for you to have with those who don't realize that this country is being run by Bolsheviks who stole an election. I think it's a very good place to start. And again, I try to make these videos and these lives for you to hear some common sense just about the things we're doing without getting too big into the weeds of what this guy's going to do and that guy's going to do, and it's going to work out perfect and we'll all be happy. Just looking at where we are right now, waking people up is an important thing. And when you have the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation raiding a local police department for a multinational investigation on mortgage fraud, election fraud, and election integrity, along with child, human, and sex trafficking, you have a corrupt government. They should be supporting that investigation, not breaking in and stealing their files and trying to silence any of those who dissent. These are Bolshevik tactics that are being used in America, and Americans are literally sitting back and just taking it. Now, on top of this, we have National Guard all over the country. There are multiple videos, sightings, reportings out there of National Guard in New York City, Chicago, and Boston. Now, in New York is starting to make more sense to me because these videos started showing up on Friday. New York is starting to make more sense today because the New York City head of the police department for NYC, Edward Caban, is actually under investigation. His home was raided for corruption. We don't have much information on what type of corruption that could be. I would assume that the list could be very long for the head of the police department in New York City. There have been multiple people in upstate New York whose homes have been raided by the FBI. But then again, take a step back. I just explained to you that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation raided a police department trying to prove crimes to keep those crimes from coming to light. So we don't know who is who and what is what until the allegations and evidence come out. But it's important to note. I think it's always important to note these things. When officials have their homes raided, people that the public is supposed to be able to trust to do the right thing, when their homes get raided by different three-letter agencies or anyone else, I think that we need to talk about that as a nation and get more information on it quickly. You know, they could find, you know, the supposed bomber in Nashville from Christmas in 2020. They found him in like 6 hours, but you know, they can't find evidence on people or release their information, or they seal the indictment so no one knows, like the lady in upstate New York who's being accused of working as a Chinese spy with the CCP. The American people need to know about that right now. We are adults. We are treated like children, and all information is held from us, but we need to know these things immediately. And it would make everyone's life a lot easier if we did that, because people like me wouldn't have to spend so much time digging on the internet, reading stuff, and doing videos for people to try to disseminate this information. But that's just not where we are right now, and that's okay. We'll all get through this together because God leads all good things for good people. Now, Eric Adams came down with COVID. That's the mayor of New York. So while his police chief was being investigated for fraud and corruption, the mayor all of a sudden got COVID, so he can't do any interviews. Janet Yellen, Satan's accountant, she just came down with COVID. So COVID is being pushed off on us again in a massive scale. We're watching the state of Maine is now asking their citizens in Maine if they will voluntarily shelter in place or lock themselves down for the EEE virus, which is being born of mosquitoes. Little known fact to anyone who doesn't pay attention to stuff online, Bill Gates had multiple contracts in the state of Florida, I believe in Maine as well, for genetically modified mosquitoes to be released in the wild to do tests to see if they could spread God knows what. They're calling it a vaccine through a mosquito. But it's important to note, number one, that EEE is an equine disease. That is a horse virus. I don't know if it's dangerous to other people, and I don't trust if someone says it is, but I'm pretty sure viruses don't jump from horses to humans, but apparently the Wuhan lab is a miracle worker at doing these types of things. Now, speaking of the Wuhan lab in that area of the world, interesting information coming out of Tokyo, Japan. The Tokyo Electric Corporation has actually just put out a public statement saying that they are now mining Bitcoin. It's going to go back to finances here a little bit, but not really. I think Bitcoin's a totally different subject. Interesting to hear that the largest electricity provider in the entire nation of Japan, which is the third largest consumer of electricity in the world, is dedicating part of their grid to mining Bitcoin. I think this is fantastic for them. I think it's a great way to utilize the extra energy within a grid to be able to produce sound money for a nation that's living with worthless money. The yen is completely worthless. So we talk about that stuff all the time, but that was mentioned off in Japan. I think it's a good little side note when we're talking about the things happening at Wuhan. Internationally, Germany and Poland are both, well, Germany is publicly issuing that they're shutting down their borders. Germany has had open borders for about 7 years now. Some of the caravan footage that I remember from 2019, 2020, you're talking 125,000 people from the Middle East, from Africa, just walking into Germany. They tried to close the borders then, but now they're looking at stabbings and rapes the same way that the UK and England is. And of course, the wealthy in those nations don't know, but the poor and middle class, they notice it every day and everywhere that they go, just like in Springfield, Ohio, where we're going to talk about in just a second. But Poland is a different story. Poland has not announced anything there. I have just heard from 3 different people who've been to Poland personally. 2 of them are contractors, and all 3 of them have told me that Poland is preparing to lock their borders down. So when Poland and Germany are locking down borders, that's also something the American people need to know about, because while that's happening, Iran is supplying new missiles to Russia, as well as Israel is now going through their own trial. Israel's an interesting topic. There are definitely evangelicals who Israel can do no... Listen, the Israeli government is as corrupt as any government in the world. They are not the chosen government. They're also not the chosen people. We're all God's chosen people. However, the Israeli government is exceptionally corrupt, just like the American government, every other government around the world. But they happen to have a clause when it comes to hostage situations called the Hannibal Clause. And the Hannibal Clause basically means that if a foreign invader, this started, I believe, in 2007, they created this, and they call it the Hannibal, which I find interesting that Donald Trump keeps saying Hannibal in all of his speeches, perhaps drawing attention to this. But there are now 2 instances where the Israeli soldiers are being, it hasn't been proven yet, there's pressure being put on them to prove that they did not shoot innocent people on October 7th or an American at the border who was protesting. The way that this Hannibal works is essentially if there's a hostage situation in Israel, the Israeli government gives the soldiers permission to shoot everyone in sight, even the captors, even the ones who are being captive. These are brutal tactics to be used, and of course it's not my nation, so I don't have a voice there. Maybe it's something that they want, maybe it's something they don't, but all I know is Israel is now under scrutiny, and time will tell whether or not their soldiers are shooting their own people and Americans at the border. El Salvador had an interesting thing happen. A helicopter crashed with 8 huge police officials who were harboring a fugitive banker from El Salvador. So El Salvador by itself is a very interesting story in international news. And a banker was so deep in his arrest, he escaped with the help of corrupt police officials who ended up dying in a helicopter crash. I just find that fascinating news. I'm going to get into Springfield in just a moment, but before I do that, I think it's important to talk about some of the comedy that's happening in the political arena. Gavin Newsom, reportedly, again, I don't know Gavin Newsom, thankfully, and I don't know his relatives, but reportedly, Gavin Newsom's relatives are actually organizing a fundraiser for Donald Trump. This is now 2 major Democrat officials whose family, it may not be his brother and sister, it might be his 5th relative down the line. It kind of doesn't matter. These big Democrat families are now having their either close or distant family members raising money for Trump because they're tired of their own people running the nation. Just kind of funny. Kamala Harris finally put out her policies today, hours before her debate with Donald Trump. Her policies are really no different than Biden. They sprinkled in a little Trump. So that's kind of the recipe for appeasing people who are too stupid to research on their own about an actual candidate, where they can say, yeah, we've got a little bit of Biden, we got a little bit of Trump, we put him in a shaker, and we've got a Kamala Harris martini. You're going to love this martini. Drink it down. It's going to be amazing. Watch what happens. As soon as that debate's over, she could literally vomit on the microphone, and CNN is going to say she won the debate. That's going to happen. Half of this nation is going to be completely hammered by the time it's over because of all the debate drinking games. So they might as well drink the Kamala Harris, the Biden policies, the Trump policies, swirl them together, shake them up, and you've got a recipe for disaster and unfulfilled promises. On top of that, RFK was denied to be removed from the ballot in Michigan. This was kind of expected to come. That is a Michigan state law. After a certain period, a candidate cannot be removed from the voter roll. So I don't want to blame that on, that's not a corrupt thing, the fact that they're following a law. That's actually a normal thing. However, it is an unusual thing for a state to have that clause in place. Now, what happens if the candidate dies? What happens if the candidate gets an incurable disease or some form of illness? What happens if the candidate gets hit by a truck the day before the election? People should be able to be removed from voter rolls, and candidates should be allowed to be removed from their candidacy all the way up to the election. So the people of Michigan, I think that's a very important topic, so that you don't have a third party draining out votes in the most important election in U.S. history. I think that's a very important thing to cover. And we will get into 3 topics before we go to Q&A, because I really want to do Q&A more. It's what I'd love to do. I have a lot more fun doing that. However, I think it's important to cover one topic that everyone's talking about the last 2 days, which is Springfield, Ohio. Springfield, Ohio is a town of 60,000 people. It's a town about the size of the town I live in. They dropped off 20,000 Haitians. If you've gone to Florida at any given time and you've spent any time in especially South Florida, you will understand that the Haitian communities are very not tolerant of American culture, and they really don't have much of an interest in assimilating. They want to live in Haiti and America with air conditioning and food. And since they don't have either of those, because a town like Springfield, Ohio, just simply does not have the housing budget or the housing infrastructure to take on 20,000 new people, many of them are now shooting geese at the park and eating them, as well as people's pets. This is just the beginning, folks. This is just one town. I've spoke with 3 people who live in small towns in Ohio, in Indiana, in Illinois, and they're experiencing the same type of influx. Now, theirs wasn't, 20,000 people within a week being dropped off. Theirs is more like 500 a day for 6 months that are coming in, and now it's getting to the boiling point. So all this battle of close the border, if you don't close the border, then I'll ship my illegals to Martha's Vineyard. It's all starting to bite them in the butt, as evidence in Martha's Vineyard, because an illegal was just arrested again for multiple rapes and sexual abuse, including sexual abuse of a minor. This person, this illegal immigrant, was actually released from prison for trying to strangle someone. So he tried to strangle and kill someone. They let him out of prison in Martha's Vineyard, and then he raped multiple people, including children. These problems are just beginning. They are absolutely not the end. This is not the big exposure. Over the past 3.5 years, they've been shuttling people around the country in small increments. They're dropping off 100 here, 200 there. Springfield got a shock to the system, which is why it's so sporadic there. But it's interesting to watch the neighbors' take on this. So even neighbors have been interviewed and simply saying that people in rental homes are being kicked out because the government's paying twice as much to the landlord to let the illegals live in there. One guy reported that he had almost 100 Haitians living on his street. Last year, he had no one of Haitian descent on his street. And I find that to be just a repetitive story that we are going to see over and over again in this country. And listen, for conservatives like myself and for you, the geese thing, eating someone's pet cat, that's atrocious and horrific. But, most of us are duck hunters. Like, we eat duck, we eat goose. If they don't have food, that's God's food. I don't, if it's a wild animal, I agree with the Second Amendment in hunting. When it comes to killing people's pets and eating domestic cats, you have a really big problem. Should be thankful at this point in time that there's still cats and geese. What happens when they run out in the local area? What happens when the geese migrate? What happens when all the cats are indoors? That's the real problem that's ahead. City of Baltimore reported that they have arrested 153 illegal aliens for sex offenses just in the city of Baltimore. That's just the 153 that they caught and actually arrested. Now, these illegals, I don't want to give them any advice, but they should go to Los Angeles, because in Los Angeles, they're now not even arresting people for pedophilia because they won't be prosecuted. This is the state of this country. This is the chaos being created. Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang that's taking over buildings in Colorado, confirmed. Dallas, almost confirmed. I'm almost confirmed that they have taken over a building here. They certainly have taken over street corners. They've taken over O Block in Chicago and another apartment complex in Chicago. So this Venezuelan gang, I think people have a misperception of gangs, especially South American gangs. I think they think like they're just like American gangs. An American gang protects its turf, right? That's what they do. Certain areas, that's them and their city and their town. These South American gangs are international conglomerates. They work with every other corrupt person, drug dealer, and trafficker in the entire world. These are large multinational organizations that live and thrive on violence and intimidation and fear and brutality to move their drugs and their people all throughout the world. They do not take lightly. They have now taken over the Gateway Hotel in El Paso, Texas, which from conversations I've had, they've actually controlled for about 5 weeks. They're just now getting the report. There have been 700 different reports issued to the El Paso Police Department about this gang taking over the hotel. There are multiple videos out there of them having, crazy parties on the upper floors with guns in hand. There have been 2 reports of gunfire going off during these parties. You are watching chaos approach. This is what's happening in America, and I don't know if there's any end in sight. But the good thing that we have is we have an assassination attempt against a presidential candidate. President Trump attempt on his life was July 13th. That is going to be 2 months ago in a couple of days. That is a complete error on the behalf of the Secret Service, and it makes you think, what is the Secret Service actually doing if they can't protect a presidential candidate? By the way, Trump's assassination left the news cycle almost as fast as the Las Vegas shooting. And I want to bring these things up. No one should forget the Las Vegas shooting. 50 plus people lost their life there. And during that, there was also 13 people who lost their life afterward because they were saying, I think there was more than one gunman. Ian Carroll's done a great video online exposing that there was helicopter fire coming down from there that's provable through records, from helicopter records, from street records. There's a great website I'll use in the next episode. I'll put that on in the summary for you. But it's interesting to watch. The Trump assassination has left the news cycle literally faster than the Las Vegas shooting. And that is a complete botch or a drop of the ball by the Secret Service. So what is the Secret Service doing? Well, I got a text message today from a Disney employee who sent me a text message that someone said, this is fake news. It's not fake news. The Secret Service, who can't protect the United States president or protect anyone in this country, they are actually going to be protecting all of Disney World as they shut down Disney World for a complete LGBTQ party. So, they can't protect the United States president, but they can help a bunch of gay people ride rides and act like children wearing mouse ears. That is the sad state of affairs with American institutions. We have no institutions left. We have no president running this country. There's no one running this country from a forward-looking perspective. There is no public face running this nation. We have a vice president running on policies she implemented that she wants to change that she hasn't. And we have another presidential candidate who should be in office, who was robbed from an election, who has been shot at, and half the country doesn't even talk about it anymore. This is how chaotic the news cycle is getting. And before I wrap this up, a couple things here. James Earl Jones, don't know if he was a good man or bad man. I think he was an incredible actor with a great voice, and I'll never forget as a baseball player him saying, "People will come, Ray. People will most definitely come." It's some of the greatest lines in human history. Also, Darth Vader. God rest your soul, James Earl Jones. Whether you're a good man or not, you're an incredible voice and seemed like a very nice man to me as a fan. And we'll certainly miss that deep voice in a lot of our movies and entertainment moving forward. And the last thing I'm gonna wrap up here with today before we get into Q&A is, today is September 10th. Tomorrow is September 11th. We're going to go through a lot of hard questions that need to be answered about September 11th, and much of it may be new news to you. Much of it may be old news to you, depending on how well read you are and how researched you are on 9/11. But today is 9/10. Today is the 23rd anniversary of Donald Rumsfeld telling the world that our Treasury Department was missing $2.3 trillion. So the day before, 2 planes hit buildings in New York. 2 planes hit buildings. 3 buildings fell, all in controlled demolition style. A plane, quote unquote plane, hit the Pentagon in the exact location where the servers were held that held the $2.3 trillion. And a couple of planes went down. We couldn't find plane parts, must have evaporated in multiple fields throughout this country. Tomorrow is a day of memory in this nation, and I don't want to belittle that. I lost 2 people I know in Tower 1 on September 11th. I darn near joined the military. I have plenty of friends who did join the military, and some of them who lost their lives fighting a useless war in Iraq to find weapons of mass destruction that simply didn't exist. Iraq is a fascinating tale from 2001 all the way through 2014. I think that 2014, when ISIS invaded Iraq, conquered Mosul, which used to be called Nineveh, which is where the 10 lost tribes of Israel were destined after 722 BC in 2 Kings when they became slaves of Assyria. There's so much to that story. The burial site of Gilgamesh was uncovered at that time. 2014 was also the year there was a color revolution in Ukraine. So many different things went down in 2014. I am going to do an episode about that very soon. But it's important to remember two things about September 11th. Never forget. They tell you never forget, but they tell you never forget September 11th. Never forget September 10th, the day $2.3 trillion was publicly announced that it was missing from our treasury, which we still have never found. And never forget September 12th. It's my wife's birthday. But more importantly, September 12th from this nation was the most patriotic day that I have ever experienced as an American in my 47 years on Earth. So the tragedy of September 11th created patriotism that has been unparalleled, but boy, did it fade quickly. You know, this nation needs to get back to that feeling of September 12th, where you felt proud to be an American. You were ready to fight adversaries. You were ready to stand up for your neighbor because they were an American too. We get told that we're African American, Caucasian American, Jewish American, all these we're American. If the American is at the end of your word, you are my brother, you are my sister. We should be thinking in a nationalist style right now. We hear nothing but fund Ukraine, fund Israel, fund this, fund that overseas. We need the money. Hopefully that spirit of patriotism returns to this nation without a catastrophe, but the path that we're on right now, the logical betting man would not put money on the fact that we will get back to that nationalist patriot feeling without some sort of catastrophic event. And the other betting man wouldn't put money against the fact that we are rapidly approaching one of these horrible national disasters that should have easily and could have easily been fended off with solid borders, law and order being enforced, and believe it or not, a good economy. When economies fall and economics get poor within a nation, people will do anything outside of their own normal moral scope to pay their bills. They will do anything to feed their children, which means rigging an election. There are multiple people who are coming out and saying, hey, I was a ballot stuffer. I was one of the 2,000 mules from that video in 2020. And guess what? The same people came back to me and they offered me more money this year to stuff ballots. A fallen economy is not just a fallen economy. A fallen economy is also a fallen society. Because when people lose their ability to feed their family or pay their bills, they lose their strength to be morally sound. A nationalist approach to government should always have been taken and should always be taken in the future. I certainly want to help people in trouble. I certainly want to help other nations. I don't want any nation to fall into communism. But if we can't keep our own country out of communism, how in the world are we going to help anyone else? How in the world are we going to do that? So never forget September 11th, but never forget September 10th, when Rumsfeld told us 2.3 trillion was missing, and never forget September 12th, which is the greatest patriotic day that I have ever experienced in my time on Earth. So that's what I have for you today. A really quick session for you today, just running through the news. By the way, I think it's important to note that in the middle of all this, before we wrap it up, that Donald Trump's executive order 13848, which was signed in 2017, I believe on September 12th, also an important day, actually was an executive order that said basically anybody who messes with U.S. elections, whether you're domestic or foreign, we are going to seize your assets. That executive order was just reinstated by the Biden administration for the fourth time. It expired in 2021, so it was just re-upped again. And those like me, we look at it and say, you know, this is great. You know, you have to look at it from both perspectives, right? It could be used against us for rigging an election by having a video like this talking about election interference. We don't know what the future brings. I believe that executive order is being put in place because eventually we will see justice in this country. And I'm not a Pollyanna person by any stretch of the imagination. I just see all the chips falling where they are right now. And I see that those who are in power who've done horrible things to this country are running scared like children. And there's a reason for that. And we should never take our foot off the gas to seek justice. Without justice, without a sound economy, without sound money, this nation ceases to exist. And we've watched that erosion happen ever since we were born. We've literally watched it since the moment we were born. So that's what I have for you here today. Let's go ahead and open it up for a few minutes of Q&A. If you guys have anything, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Hey, Kelly, Girl Lane, everyone, I love seeing all of you on here. Thank you so much for being here today. Indiana National Guard will supposedly be tasks and details in DC after the election. Thank you, Kelly. I've heard that before. I think this will definitely be the first election in my lifetime where National Guard will actually be required at an election itself. Amanda Couch, you made it. Hey, Amanda, how are you? Another soldier visited the wall. Yeah, Kelly, the last time my husband was in Israel, he and another soldier visited the wall. Somebody did something illegal, and the police or the guards shot him. They don't mess around, at least that time. They don't mess around at all. They don't want any... here's the thing that bothers me about the corrupt Israeli government. They want to put their nose into our business and tell us to be tolerant and tell us to open up our borders and to support all different nationalities, races, colors, and creeds, and people of different backgrounds. I don't have any problem with that done legally. But when you force borders to be open, their borders have been locked down for 39 years. They've had a wall surrounding their nation for as long as I've been alive. And they don't allow anyone in there. In fact, many times they do DNA tests before someone goes there. So the hypocrisy of that is it needs to be said, and I don't care who it offends. I really don't. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to share information, and hopefully at the end of the day, pray with you and get closer to God together, because Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life. The truth is right in the middle of that. Without the truth, we don't have a way and we don't have a life, and we need to have that truth. So thank you for sharing that with us, Kelly. Watch your cats. Yes. Seymour, Indiana. I've been to Seymour, Indiana. I played a baseball tournament there when I was young. Millersville is near Nashville. Thank you, Kelly. I had no idea where Millersville is. It's just really think about what happened in Millersville. A police department is doing this multinational investigation. A Bureau of Investigation comes in and steals all their files. That by itself should be headline news across this country, at least in the state of Tennessee. And we have heard nothing on it on the mainstream media. I don't know. What else do we have here? Eric Holcomb of Indiana is partnering with Ukraine for mutual business agreements. I have no idea what the state of Indiana will do to help Ukraine, but that sounds like a collusion opportunity and a way for Eric Holcomb to bolster his career by partnering with leftists who support Ukraine, regardless of how corrupt Ukraine has not been allowed into NATO ever, because they are the most corrupt government on the earth. And our government has now sent them $214 billion of our money that we won't pay. Our children will pay. If our children aren't slaves from Bolsheviks directly, they will be slaves to the central bank at this pace. There is really no way around that. So it doesn't look like we have many questions today. Hopefully we have a good job here. Hopefully everybody enjoys the debate tonight. I'm anticipating watching it here with at dinner time and just laughing a little bit. I hope Trump is calm. I hope that he delivers just great remarks. It's just prime real estate for political comedy. And I hope that we see some political comedy, but more importantly, I hope the rest of the nation, and keep it simple when it comes to elections here. I mean, I watched a video of this overweight gentleman with no shirt on at a beach saying, "I'll vote for Kamala Harris if she runs over a child on TV just because I hate Donald Trump." You're not going to change their mind in the next 2 months. That's not going to happen. The people that need to watch the debate are the ones who haven't decided who they're going to vote for. Most of the people in this country, there's staunch Republican, staunch Democrat. They're voting with their party. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. You have people who are independents who've said, "Hey, I'm voting for Trump," no one is voting for Harris. Just the same way nobody voted for Biden. Nobody voted for Biden. Nobody said Joe Biden's the greatest presidential pick. Joe Biden's going to be awesome. Joe Biden has the best policies. Nobody said that. They said he's not Trump. So I'm voting not Trump. So it's Trump or not Trump. That's the election. And the Trump or not Trump people, they're already sold. This debate is for about 550 to 750,000 people in America who are still undecided. So I hope that these undecided electors, these voters, get a chance to see not only President Trump's brilliance in debates. He is an incredible debater, truly historically good. And I hope they see how horrifically awful Kamala Harris is at speaking to human beings with her voice. And that's all you need to see. So I hope Trump just gets to the point, answers policy questions, and throws the ball back to Harris and lets her fumble on the 2-yard line, as she will inevitably do. Or as I said, it doesn't matter what she does, because the same if they're going to continue to watch mainstream media tomorrow morning, Kamala Harris is going to be, God, she was just, incredible. I can't believe this was one of the most historically well-performed debates in history. Just prepare for all that crap. I know most of you don't watch it, but I watch mainstream media quite a bit because I like to study my enemy and see what they're doing. So we will see. We'll see what happens. But until then, keep your eyes on the real prize. The prize is salvation. The prize is your soul. The prize is your relationship with Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. That is who has always been under attack. If you study all of history, 140 million Christians died in the last century. 140 million Christians lost their lives in the name of Jesus. We have always been under attack. We are many members of one body, and we are coming together all throughout the world. It's just an important time for that. We can't control politics. We can't control Washington, D.C. We can't control that. The things we can control are how we love our family, how we praise our God, and how we serve our nation. Those are the three things that we can really, really do in our lives. So again, as always, I'm Eric Rice. This is the Rice Report. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless this country. Have a great night, everyone.